Hey, welcome to a new episode brought to you by regendocs.academy. I am just getting over what most likely was COVID. I'm not out of the woods yet. I still run a little fever in the middle of the night, but it hasn't kept me down. I've worked every day, so I'm excited about that. We're going to be talking about a really important subject to us dudes, and that is hair loss. Excuse me a second. And that is hair loss, male pattern baldness, receding hairline. The hair gets thinner and thinner. It doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to age gracefully if we don't want to. And the guy that we're going to be talking to in just a moment, let me bring him on. It's a friend of mine named Dodge Feeler. How you doing, Dodge?
I'm good, Carl. How are you doing? Good to see you.
So, you actually spent the majority of your beginning of your career in hair restoration, right?
I did, yeah. In Austin, Texas, I worked for McGrath Medical, where we performed hair surgery regularly and worked with hair loss solutions. And I learned a ton there, and it really taught me a lot about just how to take care of patients and just realizing how these things can actually affect them so negatively.
And we don't. There's not just one thing that causes hair loss, right? Everybody always thought it was hormonal. Is it hormonal?
It's not. There's a lot of different issues. There's potentially like an autoimmune disease, some type of inflammatory issue. Definitely some problems can be going on in the gut. We also know there are a lot of genetics at play. I'm not as familiar with the genetic side, although I do have some good friends that are. But it's multifactorial. It's like always, it's never one thing. And there's also not one thing that's going to take care of the issue.
It's funny, like I'm battling several different things at one time. That's part of the aging process. I've got lumbar spine issues. We talked about that yesterday. I have neuropathy in my lower legs, which may or may not be contributed to by the lumbar spine.
Yeah.
But it's like when you start to, there's no single process, there's no single system that you can address typically for these types of problems.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm wheezing. And as a result of that, you have to be prepared to abandon the silver bullet mentality of pharmaceutical companies and even supplement companies.
Yeah.
So it's worth understanding that if you think just one thing is causing your problem, you're fucking stupid. That's all.
Yeah. The root cause is usually multiple root causes and often current lifestyle issues.
So let's talk about genetics for a second. So I have cousins that went bald, and their fathers were bald.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those cousins think that it's genetic predisposition. But what I like to tell people is you not just get your genetics from your family, but you get your lifestyle choices from your family. You get the foods that you love to eat. You get your hobbies or the lack thereof. You get all those things from your family too. How do you tease the genetic side out that from the fact that you're type 2 diabetic just like your father was, and a lot of type 2 diabetics lose their hair?
Well, there's a lot of talk about breaking ancestral patterns or ancestral, ties, and it does come down to what is your lifestyle. If you have a diabetic and you say, oh, well, that's genetic because every single one is diabetic. Well, it's also because you are eating a bunch of processed stuff. You're not focusing on protein or whole food. So I think there's still some genetic predisposition there. A lot of times they're going to say mother's side, father's is where that genetic comes from. But we know that it's variable. And when it comes to hair loss, there is genetic markers to that. But it is also, like you said, it's the habits that come with that family.
So my grandfather on my mother's side was bald as a cue ball. Mm-hmm. He didn't even have eyebrows. So he suffered from some sort of alopecia, which it was probably more likely than anything else. It was probably an autoimmune disorder that he suffered from.
Definitely, yeah. There's universalis where alopecia universalis, where it's every hair on the body is gone. There's areata where it starts in patches, and obviously it may take years for patients to recover. They may never get it all back, but a lot of time it kind of comes and goes, and that is obviously inflammatory issues. And that's also where, sometimes if we work on the gut, we do see those improvements there, which is fascinating. And it's also kind of a test to much deeper things than hair loss.
and a testament to that statement is I was thinking, I know a guy who had alopecia, and he was suffering from some sort of he had caught something in a hospital, and they did a fecal transplant on him, and all of his hair grew back after the fecal transplant, which means that his alopecia was driven by something in his gut.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's fascinating. And a lot of time when they have a type of autoimmune issue there, they have other autoimmune problems, whether it's lupus or, thyroiditis, Hashimoto's. I mean, there's usually more at play. Like that is just, kind of manifesting physically when there are things internally going on, and it's loose loss of hair is what is being shown.
Interesting. So let's talk about the traditional stuff. If you're on Instagram or social media, something comes up in front of your eyes every day about taking finasteride and taking these DHT blockers. Why does 5-alpha reductase get such a bad name? Does it really put the follicles to sleep?
So, I mean, it's, DHT obviously is going to increase things like sebum. It definitely is eventually going to kind of cause it where that hair follicle over time will kind of snuff out. It will miniaturize. We have something called a hair cycle where it's the growth phase, kind of an in-between phase, and then the end phase where it's going to fall out. And typically, if you have very high DHT, like if someone is using a DHT-based steroid or something, that is when you fry those hairs, because it is causing those hairs to kind of advance into what's called the telogen phase much faster. And then the growth phase is getting smaller and smaller over time and then the next thing you know, you're seeing this significant hair loss. So DHT definitely has the biggest impact. But there are androgen receptors all over the scalp. It's actually kind of hilarious. It's really specific to the hair and then also to the prostate for men.
But isn't it also true that simply blocking DHT doesn't necessarily wake the follicle back up, or does it just take so long for the follicle to reawaken that people just think it's not working and they give up on it?
So it's obviously it's not a guarantee, but it is interesting because we'll have people that are in their late 70s get on finasteride or dutasteride, and suddenly they have some hair growing back. Is it sufficient where they're happy with it? Not always, but you typically see some hair come back. But you're just basically taking away some of that trauma to the hair, and typically you're wanting to add in some other things that are going to promote blood flow and hair growth. But it's basically just taking away that consistent trauma. It's allowing the growth phase of the hair cycle, which is the anagen phase, to just start working again. Obviously a lot of those follicles may never come back, but it is fascinating. The shorter time you've had that hair gone, the more likely you are to grow it back.
But why don't they come back? Why do I grow hair out of my ears where I never grew hair at all? You know what I mean? And like I'm at this age now where I have bushels of hair growing out of the insides of my ears. Those follicles seem to be able to thrive where they didn't exist very well. So why can't we get the hair on the scalp to reawaken? What role does blood flow have? I remember reading a study many years ago, probably 12 years ago, that said that 2/3 of all men with male pattern baldness had poor blood flow to the scalp. Is the answer simply, massaging the scalp every single day and reinvigorating the blood flow into it?
I mean, there is some proof that could help. That's also where microneedling has kind of come to play. But there's definitely, as we get older, there are times that our nitric oxide levels are going to slowly decrease over time, which can also go back once again to the gut. Our friend Sean Bean, he's helped us a lot with looking at some of that stuff most recently. But yeah, it is often that we are reducing blood flow over time. So if you have a smoker or someone who's been a heavy drinker their whole life, they are much more at risk to have advanced hair loss faster. You have the anomalies where they can be doing all that stuff and have no hair loss, but blood flow is essential to that. And as we get older, there are vascular changes, so it makes a huge impact. And that's why minoxidil with red light therapy or something like that can actually make an impact. But even things like tadalafil, a PDE5 inhibitor, can also help with that blood flow.
What is this? What is what, James? Just give me a break and be a little bit more explicit with your question. I've been using androgens. over 20 years now. No, this is not a new show. I do periodic shows for regenerative practices. I'm very involved with Gun Leash. I really don't have any time to do shows. This is not Superhuman Radio. No, it's not. But I still have interest in this area. I've been using androgens over 20 years, well over 20 years, but my hair really didn't start thinning and getting like it is now. And it's a lot fuller. Typically, I put a lot of oil on my hair. I'm a greasy Italian, so I really oil I'm serious. Like Elisa puts black towels up on the furniture because I'll leave a wet spot but I just like putting oil on my hair. I feel like my father now. But my hair really didn't start thinning, I would say, until I was about 58, 59, because I have pictures of me at 58 and like I still had a lot of thick hair on my head.
Yeah.
But something changed. Yeah. And I tend to think it's blood flow related, to be honest, because I think blood flow throughout my entire body has changed. Sensitivity to the hands has changed, the feet. I really think that a lot of neuropathies are driven by the lack of blood flow. I take 5 milligrams of Cialis every single day. I don't take it for erection. I take it for its supposed anti-aging value. What do you think of that?
I prescribe the 5 milligrams a lot for patients, and it is not always for what the secondary reason that was made, which is originally is for infant pulmonary hypertension, but now it is actually something that's very beneficial for blood flow. I think as someone's aging, blood pressure is slowly going to keep up, getting lower because the arteries are getting harder. Increasing nitric oxide is not just helpful for erectile strength; it's also helpful for the heart, and we know that that's a reason why we have to be careful with dropping estrogen too low, because that can also decrease nitric oxide. So I think it's amazing. I also think it's amazing for the gem, for pump, increasing blood flow to the muscles. And like I mentioned earlier, we know now that it does actually increase protein synthesis.
So James makes a great point here. I can tolerate 5 milligrams of Cialis every day without it causing any type of GERD or heartburn. And I started to think, I wonder if nitric oxide, I know it relaxes the esophageal sphincter, but does it influence the microbiome in any way? And generally, if you take 5 milligrams a day, which is not the sex dose, the sex dose is like 20 milligrams in one shot. But if you take 5 milligrams a day, you don't get the heartburn from it.
And I've gone as low as 2.5. Yeah, he jumped to it, but 2.5 milligrams, and even one makes an impact. I think it also has to do with just where are we at on a vascular level, how much you need. I really don't think tadalafil typically does actually become less effective. I think it's that there are those physiological changes over time.
But do you think it changes the diversity of the microbes in the gut? Are there microbes that thrive versus can't survive in a high nitric oxide environment? That's a Sean Bean question, I guess.
Well, he and I have been talking at length. Where obviously we've talked a little bit about bringing that more to the forefront eventually. But yeah, it does make an impact. And actually, some of the gut testing we've started doing, we're actually able to look at each type of bacteria that's in the stomach, and we're able to tell who is creating, making very little nitric oxide or who's making a ton of serotonin. So it definitely makes a massive change. And it's something that we're looking into and trying to figure more out about. But I think it's going to take some time to know how to actually make this work.
I don't think you'd have to take 2.5 milligrams twice a day to achieve the 5 milligrams. Yeah, I mean,
got a 72-hour half-life. There's no need for that.
Yeah. So here's an interesting point from Victor Mader. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm sorry if I don't. Sure. Talk about alternative methods of growing the hair back.
Sure.
Essential oils, microneedling, infrared light, taping pumpkin seed oil. Okay. So I want to just address the infrared light one for a second. When I read that study that 2/3 of men with male pattern baldness suffered from poor blood flow to the brain, I'm to the scalp. Sorry. I'm having poor blood flow to my brain right now. I drew a picture of a baseball cap and put 990 nanometer LEDs in it because that's what anodyne used to help wound healing in people with type 2 diabetes that were bedridden because it liberates nitric oxide from the blood. And I thought, you just wear the baseball cap for a few hours a day and it'll increase blood flow to the scalp. Yeah. What about red light? Is 770 effective at doing that? Because I know 990 nanometers is, and 770 is just red light. What about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely effective. There are studies. It's one of the few FDA-approved devices for hair loss. I definitely would suggest using the laser light. But something that is often pointed out is it does help. There's a reason why they've used it with things like decubitus ulcers or psoriasis to help those lesions. It is very effective at healing, which a lot of the time there are some inflammatory aspects to hair loss. So by doing that with also increasing nitric oxide, which once again, Sean B brought this up, which I knew it, but with the way he brought it home, it made sense that if you're just doing infrared light, you're probably not going to get the same result if you're also adding something in to help with nitric oxide. Which there are
to preload the blood with nitric oxide, make it available. Exactly.
Which even, alcohol is going to be less effective if you don't have those precursors, whether you're using like citrulline or I really like Berkeley's nitric oxide capsules that have potassium nitrate and beet extract, or you could even eat some beets to help out with that. So I think that's a great.
And why not? And here's another thing Victor points out. Why are we taking these things orally when we want to infiltrate the scalp with greater nitric oxide production? Why aren't we making topicals for men who want to regrow the hair, like the pumpkin seed, taping pumpkin seed oil? And
that's topical minoxidil. That is actually what is increasing. So, I can tell you, after doing this for 6 years and prescribing hundreds of prescriptions of minoxidil, it is absolutely more effective to do it orally than topically. Of course, also, you're trying to get through that epidermis and the dermis to actually get to the hair follicles to do that. So I think, once again, it's not going to be one thing that's going to help you with hair loss. And it's also going to be a lifelong battle that we are not going to win. It's something that you can keep doing and you can last a lot longer, but it's going to be multiple things. So I do often suggest doing some oral things and some topical things. Like, we know that rosemary oil is about as effective as, 5 to 7.5% minoxidil topically. So there's nothing wrong with trying these other things. But it's still systemic. What is happening inside of you is going to come out.
So I did a show in 2023 where I had a big fan of the show come on twice, 2 different times. And he was microneedling and then using GHKCU topically. And hit the bald spot in his head went from a 4-inch diameter to like 1.5. It was interesting, but he was a bloody mess. Like he was doing this and he was bleeding and then putting this stuff on. But I thought, how many follicles are you damaging that aren't going to come back?
You have to be careful. I had a patient that I felt horrible for him, that myself and obviously the physician that I worked with, Dr. McGrath. He had an amazing hair transplant. He was an African-American that he had a great result, but he was always like, how can I get more hair? He started microneedling like crazy. He was doing it daily. And he actually caused scarring where he lost a lot of his transplant. And we had to really just cherry pick what he had left to try to create some kind of hairline for him. So it's not like this is just completely without side effects. You have to be smart about the microneedling. And I often suggest doing more like micro rolling, something like a 0.5 millimeter. And then maybe get like a spa or an actual hair restoration clinic to go in and do some micro needling. But that's going to be more periodic than doing making a bloody mess, just because you do have that potential of causing trauma.
So obviously biotin, all these things have been around forever and ever, and none of them work exclusively or so effectively. Otherwise, we wouldn't be asking questions about, like, what about biotin? James Baum is asking. But I mean, biotin doesn't really do anything in the long run, does it?
If you're deficient, then it's going to help. If you're not deficient, then you're going to pee it out. I think that we use that a lot with different prescriptions, because why not let's throw that one up against the wall. Let's see if that does something. So it doesn't hurt anything, which is beneficial. I know one of the pharmacies that I've used a lot, they liked biotin because it was good at binding those ingredients together. So it's sort of like, well, this is a good binder. Let's use biotin. So I don't think it's a bad thing, but it's another one of those, like, don't expect a whole lot about it. Caffeine actually is something that's interesting that can help, or even.
I just gave it up. I'm going to go bald now. I'll just get my head tattooed. That's all.
You can do topical caffeine.
Yeah. I would get my head tattooed. I really would. I would tattoo something really beautiful on my skull. So what about the really interesting emerging therapies? There's a lot of discussion about exosomes from legitimate physicians and clinics, and patients have now. It's been around long enough now where we have people who have tried it, and we're getting more and more people. I know that there's celebrities that you know of, we don't have to mention any names, who literally get exosome systemic pushes like once a week. What about exosomes for the scalp?
I've witnessed it working very effectively. It's anytime you're working with, like biologics, you run the risk of, how is your body going to respond? I also think it's a lot of, how healthy is the specimen that you're injecting these growth factors into. But no, exosomes are a great, very low potential side effect risk. Out of all the times I've seen it happen, I've seen one person end up with some enlarged lymph nodes and it was transient. It was gone within a week.
Yeah, right.
And one thing that you and I talked about yesterday is it is something that's going to most likely go systemic. And I've seen it where vision's improved. Aches and pains have gone. I personally injected into my elbow before with tennis elbow, and it helped tremendously. So exosomes are a great option. It's very low side effects, very low risk. You got to make sure you're using someone that's effective, because there are tons of fly-by-night exosome companies. But a company that I worked with, they've been working with the Mayo Clinic, and it's also helped a lot with things, irritable bowel diseases and Parkinson's. So exosomes it's fascinating. It's up and coming, but it's kind of one of those gray zones where you don't know how the FDA is going to end up feeling about it in the end. So you have to be a little careful.
I know two doctors, they're husband and wife. He believes in exosomes. He's had lots of success. He hasn't used them, but he knows colleagues that have had lots of success. And his wife is flat out, they're bullshit. It's like it's almost like religion and politicians. You on one side or the other. For a long time, I really thought they were bullshit. But I got a chance to talk to the guy who ran the Midwest market for Chimera. And Chimera was considered the premier exosome supplier. They were like, like the Ferrari of exosome. And he told me, he said, we have people that twice a year they get a systemic push. Not a lot either. It's not like exosomes used to be like $5,000 for a treatment. Now they're not. They're not.
There are some places for sure.
What's that?
They still can be. You can find them $5,000 to $10,000, especially if it's done IV. You can even find places that are way more expensive than that. But
right. But they've come down. They've come down because they're going more mainstream.
Yeah. It's something that can't be ignored anymore. It's something that just keeps getting popular, more and more popular. Where it was even, once again, like FDA was coming down on it to an extent. But I think it's gonna probably eventually look kind of like testosterone therapy. Whenever we first started chatting about it, that was like so taboo, and now it's just a recognized therapy that actually is helping men tremendously.
Yeah, I know. And I'm going to be honest, because I'm going to die someday, and they're going to say, oh, it was all the steroids he did. But I've been taking more than high doses of anabolics for decades now.
Yeah.
And, people can say, well, you had a stroke. I had a stroke because I was fooling around with orals, and they raised my blood pressure ridiculously. I just had to get a workup for a new life insurance policy, and my blood pressure is 122 over 72. It's like,
great. That's beautiful.
But at the same time, I'm on 600 mgs of testosterone a week, and people wouldn't believe. They'd be like, "Oh, your blood pressure can't be that low." Yeah, it's not. It's not about the level of testosterone. It's about the level of stress that you feel. Really, at the end of the day, to me, that's what it is.
You can work through that stuff and come up with practices to manage stress, which does absolutely impact hair loss. it changes everything. I think a lot of the time, men being the ones who end up with the strokes and the really high blood pressure, it is often internal stress and not, finding ways to manage that because
and those guys aren't on TRT. And most of them are just letting their estrogen is higher than their testosterone.
Yeah. Typically, when you start someone on testosterone, you might see a transient raise in blood pressure. Obviously, there can be some polycythemia, but it's very rare that it is the testosterone's causing the blood pressure.
So let's talk about finasteride. And what's the other one?
Dutasteride.
Okay, dutasteride, right. So they have been known, is it rumor or is it legit, that they could impair a man's libido? But that's usually if you're taking the pills, not topical, right?
Yeah, I mean, topical can definitely go systemic. The data really shows it's a less than 2% chance to have sexual side effects, which it can be libido, it can be erectile quality. It's multifactorial there as well. But it's definitely a possibility. When I was prescribing this, I'd maybe get an issue once every couple months. But the issue is very real. So I think one thing is definitely acknowledging that that's a possibility and letting the patient know, like, this is something that can happen to you. You also may just grow most of your hair back and you're fine. But it is an absolute possibility. It's also less likely than most people think. But also understanding what DHT does, for muscle tone, or even it is our strongest androgen that we make in the body. So it's making an impact somewhere. But it comes down to everything. There's always going to be a cause and effect. So there's nothing that's just going to be completely benign.
Confused physicians like to say testosterone is a male hormone, and it's not, because women have testosterone.
They need it.
But I would say DHT is a male hormone, because DHT is what changes the sex organs into male sex organs.
Yeah.
And so the first trimester is when the penis or the vagina kind of set in stone. And if your mother has high enough DHT levels in that first trimester, you're going to be a little boy.
Yeah.
And so DHT is more likely. In fact, there is a community in South America that's responsible for growing sugarcane. And they use glyphosate on sugarcane. And they spray the glyphosate on the sugarcane before they harvest it, because it kills the glyphosate kills the sugarcane, and all those broad leaves just fold up, and it makes it easier for them to go in with the machetes and hack it up. And so I missed a step. They burn it. They spray it and everything dies, and then they burn it and they don't have to hack it anymore. That's what it is. And something about the glyphosate, after it's set on fire, which it wasn't made to do, so you can't blame the companies that make this stuff. But all the little boys in that town, they were grown. They were born as a crypt orchid. Their testicles never fell.
Yeah.
And something about that residue that was left behind from burning the glyphosate, it became a DHT blocker. And the mothers weren't having boys. And then they found out what was happening. They stopped doing that. But like the whole village fell apart. They didn't have any little boys. This was amazing.
That's wild. It also kind of attests to the amount of compost they were using internationally as well.
Yeah.
But finasteride also, it will cause birth defects. It actually is effective for women, but if they happen to become pregnant, there is a chance of them becoming hermaphrodites. Coming out as a hermaphrodite.
Yeah, so exactly. So why not use progesterone? Progesterone is a natural 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. It actually almost looks exactly like finasteride, molecule against molecule. Why don't doctors prescribe progesterone for their male testosterone patients? And I have a theory about this I want to tell you, but why isn't progesterone looked at as a possible hair saver?
I have prescribed it in some topicals. I never seen what you're hoping to see with it. It doesn't mean it's not possible. There may be a route or dose that is going to be more effective. I know that a lot of people do. They'll put progesterone on their hair. with some belief that it helps, but I've yet to ever see it be overly effective.
Mm.
But it makes sense. It makes sense.
Well, and then you have the blood flow issue, right? So maybe you have some DHT issues, but on top of that, you become insulin resistant, and your blood flow to your periphery of your body is diminishing.
Yeah.
And that's why it comes back to systemic. You really have to treat. You have to look at the patient, and first of all, if they are the average American, you gotta first tell them you're gonna have to drop weight. You're gonna have to get your blood sugar into a manageable place. You have to do all these things first. Well, wait, Doc, can't you just give me something to put on my hair? No, because the hair is just an extension of what is wrong with you.
Yeah. No, I mean, and using like a combination of oral, finasteride, minoxidil, and throwing some biotin, you can see people who are extremely unhealthy specimens and still get a result, but it's still not going to approach what is really going on there. It's a Band-Aid, and also the oral minoxidil is going to cause hair growth all over, which is often not extremely exciting for a female or even guys for that matter.
Yeah, guys don't want to, you're at the beach, you look like you're wearing a sweater. That's not cool. Not at all. It wasn't never cool. I got to plug. Hold on a second.
Of course.
I sound like I'm whistling when I breathe. I have to plug Regenerative Doctors Academy. Regenerative Docs. Is it Regen Docs Academy? Yeah, Regen, REGEN, Docs, DOCS .academy. If you are a clinician listening to this show and you'd like to be trained in some of these emerging therapies to offer to your patients, regenerative practices is where you want to go to be trained. They can teach you everything from peptide therapies. They're going to be I introduced them to a physician that I had on Superhuman Radio many times, Dr. Samuel Denmead, who is reversing prostate cancer by giving men testosterone. Let that sink in. And they're going to have a course there for physicians who want to help men who have prostate cancer. They have guided psychedelic therapy for people who are now using mushrooms and even ketamine to help deal with patients who deal with stress and depression. So Regen Docs, REGEN DOCS .academy is where you want to go to be trained. So check it out. And you're going to be one of the you're going to be one of the people there that teaches these protocols for hair restoration.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm going to be teaching in general. Like I'm supposed to be presenting there in Australia in March. I'm also the director of nursing education there. So we're going to be doing continuing education hours. I'm going to be trying to help educate other nurse practitioners on things like hair loss and peptides, and even just how to create a practice, a telemed practice. It's really exciting. And I was going to mention Justin Kirkland, who's heavily involved with Regen, and I know that you love him as I do. He actually has NutriNeeds, and it's a topical hair loss solution. And you're going to be familiar with these, but it's a copper tripeptide 1, which is similar to GHK, zinc, and then thymolin, which is all, thymolin helps a lot with the microcirculation, which is, those capillaries. So I actually have a guy that I met at Dr. Seed's conference back in June, and I suggested it because he was already on everything. And he's actually seen amazing results with it.
It comes in a nice little dropper bottle. You drop it on your scalp, you rub it in, and you're done. The problem I find with most people is, and this is probably true in life in general, they're not consistent. They do it for a week and they're like, I don't see anything. What am I? You got to do stuff long enough to see the results, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no discipline to it. You have to create practices around every day. That's you wake up in the morning, you do your reading, you take care of your stress, and you put on your topicals, and you take your pills to help yourself with longevity. It has to become a way of life. Yeah. Or you're going to continue to go through all these pills and powders and topicals, and you're going to think that none of this stuff works. But when it comes to hair, it's going to take at least 4 months to see a single thing. So I usually suggest to take photos, front, back, sides, top of the head, get really good photos, and you need to monitor that. Don't obsess over it. You're going to stress yourself out, and you'll negate some of the results. But check it every 4 months, and typically, if you're using some of these things, you will see some improvement, or you may even see at least standing still with hair loss is still a win.
Right, exactly.
You have a forest fire going on. If you can stop it and slow it down for 5-10 years, it really can make a big difference.
Yeah, and it's something because the propensity for most people is to lose hair as they age, and that's just normal wear and tear. So if you can stop the hair from falling out, or the net result is it doesn't move, it stays where it is, then you're winning. You're right. You're really right. What else? What else are we missing? Anything about sleep habits? Do people cause problems by the way they sleep? When you sleep for 8 hours, you got your head pressed. Anything that we can do that has to do with lifestyle changes?
Lifestyle is definitely going to be coming down to diet and keeping yourself as.
No, I didn't mean diet. I mean tactile changes.
As far as sleep purposes, I don't know of any. I do think the cap is a little bit of a myth. Although if you have that on super tight, that's going to reduce blood flow. So that would be the one thing that I would think of. But the old cap myth is a little bit of a myth. But if you're wearing something and it's extremely tight, then that definitely can impact it.
What about sunlight? What about sunlight, sun exposure?
I have not seen anything about that. If anything, I would suspect if you're not getting sunburn consistently and causing issues, that if anything, it would help because it's going to reduce inflammation.
Yeah,
you're like me. So
melanocortin system is so underrepresented in science. A lot of the things that people attribute to the benefits of taking vitamin D are actually coming from the melanocortin system.
Absolutely.
When we look at climates where people are exposed to sun, they have lower arteriosclerotic plaque, and melanocortin stimulating hormone has been shown now to actually make the body reabsorb plaque. It's why I don't have to. I sit in the sun a lot, but once a week I microdose melanotan 2 to keep my tan. I do it all year long, and I just had carotid artery, 0 plaque. And I'm 66 years old. I should have something, So
no, that is melanotan 2. I think is something that's really underrated. It's just kind of viewed as everyone wants to get tan, which I actually don't think is a very good idea to get as tan as fast as you can, because you end up with moles and things like that. But doing that low dose, even if it's like a nasal spray, that was totally your idea. I'm not stealing that, but it's a great idea. I've used very small doses where it's really not impacting my tan at all. But I haven't used it. It's the summer in Texas, so I'm in the sun 30 minutes to an hour pretty much every day as it is.
Yeah, that's it. And don't be afraid of the sun. I understand people don't look. I have sagging skin, but I was 330 pounds at one point in time.
Yeah,
I'm down to 215 right now. I'm on my way to about 212 is where I want to get to. And as a result of that, the muscle structure and the subcutaneous fat is gone, and the skin gets a little, saggy, and it doesn't have the elastic that it did even in my 50s. But I'd rather be alive and saggy skin than be dead and looking good in the coffin. You know what I mean?
This vessel has the one life, so sure, do what you can aesthetically to take care of it, but it's ultimately like, what are you doing for longevity? Because you have an amazing woman in your life. You're not exactly trying to prove anything to anybody, and you are thriving still. So the aesthetic side, most of us get past that at some point in life, and kind of look past ourselves and our issues that we have growing up, and more appreciate. I'm still able to move my body. I mean, I've watched your gym workouts, and you're still able to throw weight around compared to so many people don't even really work out in America. So you're already at the easily the top 10% as it is. So, and that's obviously goals for me as well.
Yeah, and I've had to back down a little bit of training because I need to fix some systemic issues, and I am going to fix them. I'm going to be actually using exosomes on my lower spine, and I'm going to be doing some other pretty cool stuff. Once my back feels better, I'll be able to throw more weight around again, and I will. I'll have a second birth, if you will. I'm looking forward to it. That's why I'm trying to get right now. I can diet, and that's what I'm focused on. And so I'm going to try to get as lean as I can, and then I'm going to start focusing on the muscle gains again.
Yeah.
You do what you can.
Have you played around with FOXO4? I bring it up because it does a little to do with hair and potential hair growth graying, but it's something I've been studying a lot on. I am curious if you've done much studying on that peptide.
On which one?
FOXO4.
No, I haven't.
So it kind of seeks out senescent cells, so it helps clear those cells out. And obviously they're rat studies, but it's actually showing where they're seeing new Leydig cells, like in the testicles. They're seeing like new cells there, but they're finding it's potentially possible throughout the body where they are seeing some hair that was graying, kind of reverting back. And what they really suggest, I know you're not familiar with MOTS-C, they want you to use something that's improving mitochondrial function like that, or if you're familiar with Humanin. It was one that it came across it, and I've been studying it, but that is one that's very interesting for not so much hair loss, although you could see where if you're getting rid of the senescent cells where that could help, but even more so for potentially helping with gray hair.
Interesting. My head is gray. This is dye right there, so that I can look like I have a mohawk instead of it all being gray. But my hair's all gray. And my hair started going gray pretty young. I don't know why. There's a lot of people who said because of the iron content in my body. I've always eaten meat. I don't know that is anything to do with it. Whoa! Hope that didn't make anybody deaf.
Was that me? I have mine on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah, it's not my phone.
Oh.
Anyway, have we missed anything?
I mean, we've covered a pretty wide range, and this is something that you could probably just keep digging through if you want to. Obviously, nutrient deficiencies are something that can be looked at. I don't find a whole lot of really amazing testing for finding out who is deficient in copper and all those things. Obviously, I've had some patients that were full on vegetarian and they weren't really seeking out all the nutrients, and by kind of helping them choose to bring in some animal protein, and you mentioned iron, things like that definitely can impact it.
So the gut problems, I've had them. I gave up coffee. It changed my gut. I was talking to Dr. Sean Baker a long time ago on this show, and he said that coffee causes the loose junctions in the gut that we associate with leaky gut syndrome.
Yeah,
and I've read that before, and I gave up coffee, and my gut has gotten flatter. In fact, Aaron Singerman was the one who told me that he stopped drinking coffee because it gave him bubble gut. And I thought about it. Since I've given up coffee, my gut is different. It feels different. I'm not always burping for no reason at all. If you're one of those people and you drink coffee, think about this. The other thing is, every morning I drink 5 raw eggs. And you may think, well, salmon. No, don't worry about the salmonella. We don't. You can, when you crack an egg, you'll smell it if it's bad. It smells disgusting.
Very distinctive.
What's that?
It's very distinctive if you've got a bad.
It smells like baby shit is what it smells like. And so just to give you something to compare it to. And I've been drinking 5 raw eggs in the morning because eggs and egg whites are magic to heal the stomach. Mm-hmm. They're magic. You drink raw eggs, five raw eggs a morning. It's about 500 calories. It's not a big meal. You don't even feel it. You don't feel like you have 5 eggs in your stomach, but you'll start to notice that a lot of the things that bothered your gut, they just start going away. Yeah. And Agenus von der Planets was the one who taught me about the power of raw eggs. Do you remember who he was?
I remember listening to him. That was some of the earlier shows when I first heard that.
Yeah, he was the raw food guy, but not raw vegetables, like raw food, raw meat, raw eggs. But raw eggs in recent time have changed my gut. I'm not belching all the time. I don't feel bloated. Like I used to wake up in the morning and feel bloated. How can that be? I've been asleep for 8 hours. I haven't eaten anything. Why am I belching like as soon as I wake up? And that's because my gut has something in there that is responding to the acidity in my stomach and making gas. Like, how could that be? But everything is supposed to be down on its way south. It's like not supposed to be still be in my stomach. I started drinking raw eggs again, which I did a long time ago, but I never attributed it to doing anything special for me. It changed my gut. Give up coffee and drink raw eggs, and then you'll thank me if you have gut problems. You could, because I really believe most of the diseases we see today are starting in the gut. And you know, Hippocrates, he came up with the term hypochondriac.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the story?
No, please tell us.
He said there were people that he treated. They couldn't explain why they didn't feel good. Why, you know, but he surmised when he talked to them that it was below the rib cage, hypochondriac. And they had gut problems, but they had gut problems that he couldn't identify and say it's this with your gut. And he started to call them hypochondriacs because people didn't believe they were really sick. They're like, I just don't feel good. I don't understand why I feel like this. I'm weak, you know, whatever. And he came up with the term of hypochondriac to amass this population of people who had gut problems and they couldn't figure out what to do for them.
Fascinating.
So gut problems have been historic.
Yeah.
We just don't, we think we could put anything we want in our stomach and it's going to, if it comes out the other end, we're good. Yeah. It worked.
Makes a turd.
Yeah.
I would say too, with,
which
is funny because I had 3 this morning myself. But it's also, if you are going to drink coffee, it is best to not do it on an empty stomach. At least, you know, get 30 or 40 grams of protein. You know, if nothing else, you know they're going to get a bigger cortisol spike if you drink just straight coffee and you're on an empty stomach. It's become so popular to be fasted and drink black coffee, but you know, it makes sense without even knowing the science behind it, why that might cause issues with your gut. Where, you know, have some raw eggs and, you know, maybe some other stuff, and then drink that. And also is going to help with things like leptin sensitivity too.
Right. You know, the coffee that my parents drank was like rusty water. You could see through the cup to the bottom. Today, the amount of turbidity in a cup of coffee, if you go to Starbucks and you get an average cup of coffee, when you're done drinking it, you can see the mud at the bottom. Yeah. Well, a lot of that mud is going in your mouth and down your throat. If you don't think those little particles irritate your stomach, you're crazy. So we're not drinking coffee today. We're drinking mud. And some of that mud is irritating your gut and could be contributing to the problem with leaky gut syndrome. I believe it. I have people who message me and say, what's the best peptide for GERD? This has happened enough times now where I could actually give this advice with unabashedly. And the first thing I ask them is, do you drink coffee? Yeah. And they inevitably, everybody who's got GERD is drinking coffee. And I say, give up coffee for 2 weeks. And then I'll tell you what peptide to use. And in 2 weeks, they come back and go, my GERD went away. It's like we're making ourselves sick today because of culture. Oh, it's so cool to go to Starbucks. It's so cool to have my special coffee in the morning. It's like we literally are going out of our way and paying money to make ourselves sick. And whatever the masses are doing, the masses are sick. They're the ones with all the problems. So just stop doing what the masses do. Hey, let's see here.
That drives me crazy because it's often, you know, well, this is what everybody else is doing. You're like, well, the rest of the population's sick, so we actually want to divert away from that. And so what, like you said, whatever the masses are doing, we should get away. Oh, we got a question here.
Yeah. So Victor Maida says, what is the relationship between gut health and hair loss, and what to do for the gut? Well, I just told you what to do for the gut, but what to do for the gut?
I'd say get some gut testing, find out what's actually going on in your gut. See what by looking at the bacteria, you can actually see what is going on. You could even tell if there's potentially fungal overgrowth. But if you think about it, hair loss, it is not considered by the body for hair to be necessary. So if you were to have lots of nutrient deficiencies and you're not absorbing the food that you're eating, which is often what's happening in leaky gut or other problems, why would your hair be being created by the body? So the absorption issues, there's inflammatory issues. So you probably have a lot of other issues besides hair loss if your gut is in bad shape.
You know what's really funny? A lot of people have hives. They have rashes.
Mast
and
cells.
it comes from their gut.
Yeah.
When the gut goes bad, it doesn't just damage this or that. It damages everything. What goes in your stomach ends up in every cell in your body. I talk about how skin cancer is caused by the food you eat, not by the sun. The sun is an unwilling participant in skin cancer because we know that retinol, real vitamin A, active vitamin A, gets depleted in sunlight and is associated with the development of skin cancer. We also know that if you take retinol in a capsule or pill, it goes from your mouth and it ends up in your skin. So the food you eat that is garbage food ends up in the cells in your skin, and then the sun hits it and photoactivates it and turns on oncogenes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we could put an almost end to skin cancer if everybody supplemented or made sure they got real vitamin A in their diet regularly.
Well, let's throw some stazathine in there too.
What's that?
Let's throw some stazathine in there too, which is also miraculous for the gut as well.
Yeah. Well, how would people? Where could people get it?
Stazathine is just something that you can get anywhere. I prefer Nutrex. I've vetted them. I've spoken with the owners. They're one of my favorite ones. But it's doing that along with like spirulina is incredible for the gut. But it's also it protects you from getting sunburned.
So you said I must have misunderstood. Astaxanthin, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Astaxanthin, canthaxanthin, they're great antioxidants. They protect against sunburn, and so therefore they protect the skin. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing. We're going to look back generations from now, hundreds of years from now, they're going to realize the way we look back at generations, think how barbaric these people were. Well, how could they have been so stupid to try to treat syphilis with mercury? They're going to look back and go, my God, everything these people did effed up their guts. No wonder why they were all so sick and dying.
For sure.
Because we think that if we use something, swallow it, and it didn't kill us, then it was good for us. No, it doesn't mean it's good for you because it didn't kill you. Yeah, it's very good. And there are really there's a lot of good studies out there, Victor. You can go to PubMed, the National Institutes of Health repository for studies. It's like Google for smart people. That's Elisa calls PubMed Google for smart people. Yeah. But you can start searching for studies. Just start searching for. Use one word: alopecia. What other words would you suggest that he look at? Search.
You could put hair loss or alopecia. I mean, either of those is going to get you to. I mean, that's always going to be. Those are going to be two keywords with any of those studies. Yeah.
And then you can start adding words to tease out the ones you want, like alopecia and H. pylori. I'm just throwing that out. I'm not saying that there's a link. I've never looked. But H. pylori, overgrowth, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and alopecia. You start searching for those. You'll find studies. You'll read things. You go, holy crap, I'm doing that. I wonder if I should stop. You gotta be an advocate for your own health today, because you can't depend on supplement companies or pharmaceutical companies to tell you to do anything, because all they're going to invest money in is something that they will sell you for the rest of their lives. Cures you don't have to do for the rest of your life. You cure yourself once and you're done.
Yeah. No. And as far as the gut, I think Sean Bean and I have been doing we've been doing the gut testing. We look at what's going on with the gut, and just by looking at that, we can suggest lifestyle changes. Sometimes it's stopping oxalates. there's all different kinds of things that we do lifestyle. And then, you know, we use some of those different butyrates. We'll start kind of doing things to work with the overgrowth of bacteria, but even just helping with the histamine, you know, and the mast cell activation that's going on. Because once you get that down, you can actually start seeing what's really going on. And, you know, women that are having cystic acne from testosterone replacement, if you can get some of that stuff under control, suddenly they're not having those issues and they're able to actually be treated with testosterone replacement and feeling good again.
Now, how can people reach you?
At this point, we're about to launch my business, which is Way of Life Wellness. So there will be some announcements coming out on my Instagram, which would just my regular.
How can people follow you? How can they follow you on Instagram?
But at this point on Instagram is just my personal, which is Dodge Feeler. I have Feeler Consulting, which is the business page. At this point, that is something that I've been doing, that kind of the side business. But we are launching in September, where I'll be taking patients. I'm hiring new providers and partnering with a physician here in Austin. So there'll be a lot of announcements coming up, and obviously regenerative practices will be somewhere that I'm going to be at a lot as well.
And they are at regendocs.academy. So that's a great place for everybody to start. Hey, listen, it's always great to spend time with you. And hopefully people got something out of this.
I hope so.
And that's it. We're done.
Thank you, Carl. It's always a pleasure, man. Looking forward to seeing you.
Take care, brother. Thanks for watching.